dying. That's what Saren Whitlock thought as she stumbled through the Colorado wilderness, her white hair plastered to her face with freezing rain that had turned to sleet somewhere around mile marker 14. The trees stood like skeletal sentinels, their branches heavy with ice that cracked and groaned in the wind. The temperature had dropped 40 degrees in the past 6 hours. -40 Fahrenheit now, according to the last highway sign she'd passed before the road disappeared entirely beneath the snow. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her fingers had gone numb 2 miles back. She couldn't feel her toes anymore, which was probably a mercy because the cheap boots she'd traded healing services for 3 towns ago had worn through at the heels. Every step sent a fresh jolt of pain through her feet, but pain meant she was still alive. Pain meant she could keep moving. 7 years. 7 years of this. 7 years of wandering from pack to pack, offering her healing gift in exchange for whatever scraps of food and shelter they'd spare for a ghost-looking Omega with no family and no prospects. 7 years of sleeping in stables because the pack houses were for real wolves, not freaks, with white hair and pale skin that made everyone uncomfortable. Seren had learned early that her appearance was a problem. Not quite albino, the healers had told her parents when she was born, but close enough that other wolves found her unsettling. Unnatural. A bad omen. Her hair was the color of fresh snow, her skin so pale it was almost translucent in certain light, and her eyes were the silver gray of winter storms. Beautiful, her mother had called her. Cursed everyone else, whispered. When the rogue attack came 15 years ago, when Seren was just 7 years old, her parents had died protecting their small pack. Her father had taken down 3 rogues before they overwhelmed him. Her mother had used her healing gift to save 6 packmates before a rogue's claws tore out her throat. They died heroes. Their daughter had been given a bag of supplies and pointed toward the border before the bodies were even cold. "We can't keep you," the Alpha had said, not unkindly but firmly. "You're too strange looking. The pack is already unsettled. They need stability, not a constant reminder of what we lost." Seren had been 15 when she stopped crying about it, 20 when she stopped being angry, 22 now, and she'd finally reached acceptance. This was her life, alone, moving, surviving. The blizzard hit without warning. One moment she was following what might have been a game trail through the pines. The next, the world disappeared into a wall of white. The wind screamed like something alive and furious, tearing at her thin jacket with invisible claws. Snow came horizontal, tiny particles of ice that felt like needles against her exposed skin. Seren stopped walking, tried to get her bearings, couldn't see 3 feet in any direction. This was bad. This was how people died in the mountains. Lost. Frozen. Found weeks later when the spring thaw came. She needed shelter. Now, the temperature was still dropping. She could feel it in her bones, in the way her muscles were starting to lock up, in the sluggish confusion creeping into her thoughts. Hypothermia. Stage 1, maybe stage 2. She had maybe an hour before her body started shutting down. Then she heard it, a sound that cut through the howling wind like a knife through silk. High-pitched, terrified, weak. A wolf cub. No, not just crying, screaming. Serene's healer sense flared to life, that sixth sense that let her feel injuries and illness in living things. It hit her like a physical blow. Pain. So much pain. The cub was badly hurt. Dying. Every survival instinct Serenity had screamed at her to keep walking. Wolf cubs meant protective parents nearby. Protective parents meant territorial adult wolves who wouldn't appreciate a stranger approaching their young in the middle of a blizzard. And getting involved with pack business when you were a lone Omega with no backup was a good way to end up dead. But the cry came again. Weaker this time. Fading. Serene's feet were moving before her brain caught up with the decision. She followed the sound through the whiteout, one hand stretched in front of her face to keep from running into trees. Her healer sense guided her like a compass, pulling her toward that bright flare of pain and fear. Closer. Closer. The cub was crying words now, or trying to. Baby sounds shaped into something that might have been help or hurts or mama. Seren burst through a thicket of ice-covered brambles and stopped dead. The scene in front of her looked like something from a nightmare. The wolf cub was small, couldn't be more than a few months old, with pure white fur that was matted dark with blood. He was dragging himself across the frozen ground, one hind leg twisted at an angle that made Serene's stomach turn. Deep gashes ran across his small back, still bleeding freely, leaving a dark trail in the snow. His blue eyes were wide with terror and pain, and standing between the cub and the tree line were 3 wolves in their animal forms. Scarred, mangy, their eyes gleaming with something that went beyond simple predator instinct. This wasn't a hunt, this was torture. They were playing with him, letting him try to crawl away, then dragging him back, enjoying his fear. Rogues. Saren had seen rogues before. Every wandering Omega learned to recognize the signs. Wolves who'd been expelled from their packs or who'd chosen to leave, who'd given up on society's rules and structure. Some were harmless loners. Others were violent psychopaths who enjoyed hurting the weak. These three were the second kind. The largest rogue, a scarred male with one missing ear, shifted to human form as Saren watched. He was tall, maybe 6'4", with a face that looked like it had been on the losing end of too many fights. His eyes were the color of old amber, and they held nothing but cruelty. "Well, well," he said, his voice rough like gravel. "Looks like the moon goddess is smiling on us today, boys. First we get to kill the little prince, and now we get a pretty little Omega to play with." He tilted his head, studying her. "Though you're a strange-looking thing, aren't you? Like a corpse that forgot to die. That white hair, that pale skin. You sick or something?" "Prince," the word hit Saren like a bucket of ice water. "White fur. Being hunted by rogues who specifically wanted to kill him. Oh no. This wasn't just any cub. This was someone important. Someone whose death would matter." The scarred rogue grinned, pulling a crumpled letter from inside his torn jacket. "Got paid good for this job. Real good. The lady said make it look like random rogues. Nobody suspects the king's own advisor." He laughed, a wet, ugly sound. 20,000 gold to kill one little cub. Easiest money we ever made. Saren's blood ran cold. A conspiracy. This wasn't random violence. This was assassination. "I don't know what you're talking about," Saren said, trying to keep her voice steady. Her hand was already sliding toward the knife at her belt, the only weapon she owned. Her father's knife, carbon steel with a leather-wrapped handle worn smooth from years of use. "But you need to leave that cub alone and get out of here." The rogue laughed. It was an ugly sound, all mockery and malice. The other two shifted to human form as well, flanking her. One was shorter but broader, with prison tattoos covering his arms. The other was thin and wiry, with teeth filed to points. "Or what?" the leader said. "You gonna fight us, little ghost girl? You don't even have a pack. I can smell it on you. You're nobody, nothing, and nobody's going to care when we're done with you." He was right. She was nobody. No pack would avenge her death. No one would even know she was gone. She'd just be another unclaimed body found in the spring if the animals left enough to find. But that cub, that tiny white wolf bleeding on the ground, he was somebody, and Saren was so tired. Tired of being nobody. Tired of walking past suffering because getting involved was too dangerous. Tired of surviving when she'd stopped actually living years ago. "You're right," Saren said quietly, her fingers wrapped around the knife handle. "I am nobody." She pulled the blade free in one smooth motion, "which means I've got nothing to lose." Saren launched herself at the nearest rogue before any of them could react. The element of surprise was the only advantage she had. She wasn't a warrior. She'd had basic self-defense training from her father before he died, but she was a healer, not a fighter. These rogues were bigger, stronger, and trained to kill. But Saren had something they didn't expect. Rage. 7 years of accumulated fury at a world that had treated her like garbage. At packs that had used her skills and then thrown her out. At the unfairness of being punished for things she couldn't control. At every person who'd looked at her like she was wrong, broken, cursed. All of it came pouring out as she drove her father's knife into the throat of the tattooed rogue. The blade was sharp. She'd kept it that way, honing it on whatever stones she could find during her travels. It went in clean just left of the windpipe, finding the carotid artery with precision born from medical knowledge. Blood sprayed hot across her face. The rogue's eyes went wide with shock. He tried to speak, but only gurgling sounds came out as he collapsed. One down. The thin rogue with the filed teeth grabbed her from behind before she could pull the knife free. His claws extended, raking across her ribs. Cloth tore. Skin tore. Saren screamed as fire exploded across her left side, 4 deep furrows that went down to the bone. But she'd grown up rough. Learned to fight dirty when fighting fair wasn't an option. Saren drove her elbow backward into his face with every ounce of strength she had. Felt his nose break with a wet crunch. His grip loosened just enough. She spun in his arms and stabbed upward under the chin. The blade went through his mouth and into his brain. He dropped without a sound. 2 down. The leader roared with fury and shifted back to wolf form mid-lunge. 300 pounds of muscle and rage coming at her like a freight train. Saren tried to dodge. Too slow. Too injured. His jaws closed on her right shoulder, teeth sinking deep. He shook her like a rag doll. Saren felt bones crack. felt her shoulder joint dislocate. Her knife slipped from nerveless fingers. The world spun. She hit a tree trunk hard enough to drive the air from her lungs, then slid down to the ground. Through blurring vision, she saw the rogue stalking toward the cub who'd been trying to crawl away during the fight. The little white wolf was whimpering, barely conscious, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. No, no. She hadn't gone through all this just to fail now. Seren's healer sense was screaming at her, listing her injuries in clinical detail. 3 ribs broken on the left side. One of them had punctured her lung. Right shoulder shattered. Clavicle fractured. Deep lacerations across her abdomen. Internal bleeding. She was dying. She had minutes at best. But her gift wasn't just for sensing injuries. It was for healing them. And healing was just moving life energy from one place to another, encouraging the body to repair itself faster, to burn through vitality in exchange for accelerated recovery. She'd been taught to be careful with it, to never push too hard, to never drain herself dangerously low. Her parents had drilled those rules into her from the time she was old enough to understand. The gift had limits. Push past them and you could hurt yourself, possibly kill yourself. Her parents had never told her what happened if you pushed past every limit, if you gave everything. Seren reached deep inside herself, past the reservoir of energy she normally used for healing, past the safety margins her parents had established, down to the very core of her life force, to the fundamental energy that kept her heart beating and her lungs working. And she pulled. Power flooded through her body like liquid fire. This wasn't normal healing magic. This was something older, something primal, something that felt like it was tearing her apart from the inside, rewriting her cellular structure, burning through her DNA and leaving something new in its place. Life Weaver. The words surfaced in her mind from old lessons, ancient stories her mother had told her. The forbidden gift, the lost art, the ability to not just sense and channel life energy, but to manipulate it directly, to transfer vitality between living things, to drain or to restore with nothing but willpower and touch. The last known Life Weaver had died 324 years ago. Until now. Seren threw all of it at the rogue leader. Not to heal, but to drain. Life energy could flow both ways. She could take just as easily as she could give. She ripped the vitality from his body with ruthless precision. The rogue collapsed mid-step, his wolf form shuddering. His fur went gray and patchy, his muscles atrophied, his eyes clouded with cataracts. He aged 50 years in 10 seconds, his body withering, as Seren drained decade after decade of stolen life. He stopped breathing before he hit the ground, dead from old age, from time catching up all at once. The backlash hit Seren like a physical blow. Using Life Weaver to kill instead of heal was apparently not recommended. Who knew? Her mother certainly hadn't covered that in the lessons. Then again, her mother had probably never imagined her daughter would need to know. Seren's vision grayed at the edges. Her heart was beating too fast, then too slow, then skipping beats entirely. The world tilted sideways. She was falling but couldn't feel the impact. She had to reach the cub, had to make sure he was okay. That was why she'd done this. That was the point. Seren crawled. It was all she could manage, dragging herself through snow that was stained red with her blood, and the rogue's blood, and the cub's blood, until she couldn't tell whose was whose anymore. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through her shattered body, but she kept going. The cub was watching her with frightened blue eyes whimpering. Up close, she could see just how beautiful he was. His white fur was pristine where it wasn't matted with blood. Royal bloodlines always bred true, her mother had told her once. The most powerful alpha families tended to have distinctive colorings, white fur like fresh snow, eyes like sapphires or emeralds or amber. If the rogue had called him Little Prince, that meant this cub belonged to one of the ruling families. Maybe even the AlphaKing himself. "Hey, sweetheart," Seren whispered. Her voice sounded wrong, distant, like it was coming from someone else. "It's okay. You're safe now. I've got you." The cub whined and tried to lick her hand. His injuries were severe. The broken leg, the gashes across his back deep enough to see bone in places. He'd lost so much blood. If she didn't heal him, he might not make it until help arrived. But if she used her gift to heal him, she'd have nothing left for herself. She'd die. It wasn't even really a choice when she thought about it. Seren placed both hands on the cub's small body. His fur was soft under her palms, warm, alive. "This is going to feel weird," she told him, even though he probably couldn't understand her words. Maybe he could understand the tone, the intention. "But it'll help, I promise." Seren reached for her gift again. Not to drain this time, but to give. And she didn't pull from the environment around her, didn't try to channel energy from the earth or the trees or the dying rogues. She pulled from herself, from her own life force, the very energy that kept her heart beating and her lungs working and her brain firing. Lifeweaver let you transfer vitality between living things. The old text said you could only transfer what someone had to spare. That taking too much would kill both healer and patient. Serene's parents had apparently never been desperate enough to test the limits. She poured everything she had into the cub, felt his broken legs, straightened bones knitting back together with impossible speed, felt the gashes on his back close and seal new fur already sprouting over pink skin, felt his breathing even out his heartbeat, strengthen his pain fade into nothing. She gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left to give. The world was going dark around the edges, not gradually but in chunks like someone was turning off lights in a house. Her heart had slowed to a crawl, her breathing had stopped at some point and she hadn't even noticed. That was probably bad. The cub was healed, completely, perfectly healed, not even a scar to show for what he'd been through. He was nuzzling her face now, making distressed sounds that were too complex for a cub his age, as if he understood what she'd done for him, what it had connected. "It's okay," Saren slurred. Her lips were numb. Everything was numb. "You're going to be fine. Someone will find you. Someone important, probably. You're too pretty to be a nobody like me." Her eyes closed. She felt herself falling, but distantly, like it was happening to someone else. This was a good death, she thought. Better than dying alone in some packed stable, unmourned and forgotten. At least she'd saved someone. At least her last act had mattered. At least she'd been somebody's hero, even if just for a moment. The darkness swallowed her whole. She didn't see the cub throw back his head and howl. The sound that came out of that tiny throat was impossible. Too loud, too powerful, too layered with frequencies that shouldn't exist in nature. It rippled through the forest like a shockwave carrying harmonics that only certain bloodlines could hear. A call for help, a summons, an alpha command from a cub who shouldn't be able to produce one. Saren didn't see the wolves that began to arrive. They came from the deep forest first. Wild white wolves, the ones that lived in the ancient places and avoided human contact, drawn by the pulse of Lifeweaver magic that had exploded through the area when Saren used her gift. They emerged from the trees, slowly, cautiously, forming a protective circle around the fallen woman and the cub she'd saved. They could sense what she was, what she'd done, and they recognized power when they felt it. This was a Lifeweaver. The first one in 324 years, and she'd used her gift to save a child, asking nothing in return. That made her sacred. That made her worth protecting. More wolves came. These were different, larger, all with pristine white or silver fur that marked them as royal guard. They'd heard the cub's summons and had run full speed through the blizzard, following the sound to its source. And at the center of them, running faster than the rest, came the wolf Saren never got to see. Kale Stormcrest, AlphaKing of the Northern Territories, burst into the clearing and shifted to human form before he'd even finished skidding to a stop. He was massive, 6 feet 6 inches of solid muscle with platinum blonde hair and eyes the same brilliant sapphire blue as the cub's. He looked to be in his early 30s, though the scars covering his chest and arms spoke of a lifetime of battle. His presence filled the clearing like a physical force, the kind of power that made other wolves instinctively bare their throats in submission. He took in the scene with a single glance. 3 dead rogues, one with a knife still buried in his skull, one tiny white wolf cub, healed and healthy but crying over a woman's body. And that woman lying in a pool of her own blood, pale as death itself. Number, not pale as death. She was pale because that was her natural coloring. White hair spread around her head like a halo matted with blood and melting snow. Her skin was translucent enough that Kyle could see the blue tracery of veins beneath. Her face would have been beautiful if it wasn't slack with unconsciousness and gray with blood loss. She was breathing, barely, the faintest movement of her chest, the weakest flutter of a pulse in her neck. She was alive, but only just. And then Kyle's wolf, the primal part of him that lived beneath his human consciousness, suddenly surged forward with an urgency he'd never felt before. It slammed into his awareness like a lightning strike, powerful and undeniable and terrifying. Mate. The mate bond snapped into place like a rubber band pulled too tight and finally released. It hit him in the chest with enough force to make him stagger. The connection formed instantly, a golden thread that ran from his soul to hers, linking them in a way that went deeper than pack bonds, deeper than family, deeper than anything he'd ever experienced. This woman, this stranger who'd somehow ended up in the middle of the Colorado wilderness with his son, This pale ghost-like Omega, who looked like she'd been fighting for her life. She was his true mate. His wolf was screaming inside his head. Mine. Mine. Protect. Save. Keep. Mine. Kale's analytical mind was trying to process the impossibility of it all. His son Riven, taken 3 hours ago when their traveling party had been ambushed by rogues. Kale had tracked them through miles of forest following the scent of his cub and the bastards who'd stolen him. He'd expected to find his son dead or dying. He'd expected to have to kill the rogues himself, slowly and painfully making them suffer for every moment of fear they'd caused his boy. He hadn't expected to find them already dead, killed by an Omega who looked like she'd barely survived the fight herself. No, not survived. She hadn't survived. She was dying right now, right in front of him. Healers. Kale roared the word, his alpha voice carrying enough power to make the trees shake. Now! 2 wolves from his guard shifted and sprinted back toward the vehicles they'd left at the forest edge. The others formed a defensive perimeter, watching the trees for any sign of more rogues. And Riven, his brave, foolish, beloved son, crawled into Kyle's lap and whimpered, pawing at his father's chest. Kale wrapped one arm around his cub, holding him close, feeling the overwhelming relief of having him back safe and whole. But his eyes never left the woman. She looked so young, maybe mid-20s at most. Her features would have been striking if they weren't slack with unconsciousness and pain. The white hair, the pale skin, the face that belonged on a porcelain doll. She looked ethereal, otherworldly, like something from a fairy tale. Her clothes were shredded. Through the tears in her jacket and shirt, Kale could see dozens of injuries. Any one of them should have been fatal. The claw marks across her ribs deep enough to expose bone. The shoulder that was clearly shattered, hanging at an unnatural angle. The way her breathing rattled, indicating a punctured lung. The blood pooling beneath her. How was she even still alive? And then he saw her hands. They were resting on Riven's fur even in unconsciousness, as if she'd been petting him when she'd collapsed. And there was a faint glow around those hands. A shimmer of silver-blue light that pulsed in time with her failing heartbeat. Magic. Kale knew that signature. He'd seen it in ancient texts, in forbidden archives that only the royal family had access to, in stories passed down through generations of AlphaKings. Lifeweaver, he breathed. The word felt heavy on his tongue. Impossible. The Lifeweaver gift had been extinct for over 3 centuries. The ability to manipulate life energy itself, to transfer vitality between living things, to heal with nothing but touch and will. The most powerful and most dangerous healing gift ever recorded. That explains so much. Why Riven was perfectly healthy despite the blood matting his fur that Kale could smell was his son's own. Why this woman was dying despite being young and presumably strong. She'd used the forbidden gift. She'd given Riven her own life force to heal him. She'd been willing to die for a cub she didn't know, for his son, his heir, and she was his mate. Though she likely didn't even know it yet, considering she'd probably never felt the bond through the haze of pain and dying. Kale made a decision right then, kneeling in the blood-soaked snow, with his son in his arms and his dying mate at his feet. She'd saved the most precious thing in his world. She'd given everything to protect a child she'd never met, asking nothing in return. He would move heaven and earth to save her now. The healers arrived within minutes. 3 of them, the best Kyle had. They took one look at the woman and their faces went grim. Your Majesty, the head healer said carefully. Her name was Vera, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and steady hands. I don't know if we can... You will save her, Kale said. There was no room for argument in his voice. No possibility of failure. I don't care what it takes. I don't care if you have to work miracles. She saved my son. She's a life weaver, the first in 324 years. And she's my mate. You will not let her die. Vera's eyes widened at that declaration, but she nodded sharply and got to work. The other 2 healers joined her, their hands glowing with healing magic as they worked frantically to stabilize the worst injuries. Internal bleeding first, then the punctured lung, then the broken bones. They worked for 23 minutes straight. Kale counted every second, watched his mate's life force flicker and dim, and threatened to go out entirely. Watched the healers pour everything they had into keeping her alive. Finally, Vera sat back, wiping sweat from her forehead. She's stable, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Barely. She'll need constant care for the next week at least, possibly longer. But she should survive. The relief that flooded through Kale was almost painful in its intensity. Get a stretcher, he ordered. We're taking her back to the palace immediately. And someone clean up my son. He's got blood all over him. Riven whined and refused to move from where he was curled against the woman's horsey. He'd shifted at some point during the healing back to his human form. a 2-year-old boy with pale blonde hair and his mother's blue eyes. He was clinging to the woman's arm, tears streaming down his face. Duh, Riven sobbed. His vocabulary was limited for a 2-year-old, and he'd been withdrawing further since the kidnapping, barely speaking at all. But now the words came tumbling out in a rush. Don't let her die. Bad men hurt me. She made them stop. She's nice. Don't let her die. Kale's heart clenched. Riven had barely spoken in weeks, and now here he was stringing together full sentences, begging for the life of a stranger who'd sacrificed everything to protect him. She's not going to die, Kale promised, gently scooping his son into his arms. I swear it, Riven. She's going to be okay. And when she wakes up, you can thank her yourself. They fashioned a stretcher from branches and cloaks, handling the woman as carefully as possible. Kale carried Riven, who refused to let go of the woman's hand. They ended up in an awkward procession, the boy stretched between his father's arms, and the stranger's side connected by their joined hands. The wild white wolves that had gathered melted back into the forest, but Kale noticed they didn't go far. They were following, staying just out of sight, clearly unwilling to leave the Lifeweaver completely. That was going to be interesting to deal with later. For now, his only concern was getting her somewhere safe and keeping her alive. The woman's name was Saren Whitlock, according to the papers in her pack. 22 years old, no pack affiliation listed, traveling healer. Parents deceased. Samuel and Lydia Whitlock both killed 15 years ago. No living family. She owned almost nothing of value. Some basic healing supplies. A spare set of clothes, the knife she'd used to kill the rogues still sticky with their blood, and a small leather-bound journal that turned out to be her mother's, filled with healing recipes and notes. She was alone in the world, had been alone since she was 7 years old if KO was reading the dates right. Not anymore. She had a home now, whether she wanted it or not. She had a mate and a cub who'd imprinted on her so hard that Riven threw a screaming fit anytime they tried to separate him from her for more than a few minutes. She had a future, if Kyle had anything to say about it. The journey back to the palace would take 3 days, moving slowly to avoid jostling her too much. 3 days of Kale keeping watch over his mate, one hand on his son, and the other resting near enough to her that he could feel her heartbeat through their bond. 3 days of hoping she'd survive long enough to open those gray eyes and see the world she'd earned through sacrifice. 3 days of falling for a woman who'd proven that true strength had nothing to do with physical power and everything to do with the courage to give everything for someone else. His ghost healer, his Lifeweaver, his mate, his queen. The first thing Saren felt was warmth, real warmth, not the desperate heat of a dying campfire or the brief respite of huddling in a stable. This was enveloping, luxurious warmth that seeped into her bones and made her want to sink deeper into whatever she was lying on. The second thing she felt was softness, silk. She was lying on silk sheets. Saren had only touched silk once in her life, in a merchant's shop, when she was 12, before the owner had shooed her away for getting her dirty hands on the expensive fabric. This felt like that, but impossibly better. Smooth and cool against her skin, sliding like water when she tried to move. The third thing she felt was pain. Not the screaming agony of dying, not the sharp bite of broken bones and torn flesh. This was a dull, throbbing ache that told her body had been hurt badly and was still healing. Tolerable pain, manageable pain, living pain. Saren's eyes opened. The ceiling above her was made of dark wood beams and cream-colored plaster decorated with intricate carvings of wolves running through forests. A chandelier hung in the center, crystal and gold, catching the sunlight that streamed through massive windows to her left. The walls were stone, but covered with tapestries in rich blues and silvers. A fireplace big enough to stand in crackled with a fire that filled the room with dancing light. This wasn't a stable. This wasn't even a pack house guest room. This was a palace. Saren tried to sit up. Her body protested immediately, muscles screaming. She fell back against the pillows with a gasp. Easy. The voice was female, older, calm. You've been unconscious for 6 days. Your body needs time to remember how to work. Saren turned her head. An elderly woman sat in a chair beside the bed, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical braid. She wore the green robes of a healer, and her eyes were kind but assessing as they studied Saren's face. Who are you? Saren's voice came out as a croak. Her throat felt like sandpaper. My name is Vera. I'm the head healer of the royal palace. Vera poured water from a crystal pitcher into a glass and held it to Saren's lips. Drink slowly. Your stomach hasn't had anything in it for almost a week. Saren drank. The water was cool and pure, better than anything she'd tasted in years. When she'd had enough, Vera set the glass aside and settled back in her chair. You're in the palace of AlphaKing Kale Stormcrest in Wyoming. You've been here for 3 days. It took 3 days to transport you from where you were found. You were badly injured. Honestly, you should be dead. The memories came flooding back. The blizzard, the cub, the rogues, the fight. Using her gift, using everything, feeling her life drain away. The cub, Sirin gasped. The white wolf is he. Prince Riven is perfectly fine thanks to you. Vera's expression softened. Not a scratch on him. You healed him completely, at the cost of nearly killing yourself. Prince Riven. So he was royalty. The Alpha King's son. I don't understand, Sirin said. Why am I here? Why would the king bring me to his palace? Vera smiled. Because you saved his son's life. Because you're the first life weaver in 324 years. And because you're his mate. The room seemed to tilt sideways. That's not possible, Sirin whispered. I'm nobody. I don't even have a pack. The moon goddess wouldn't pair an Alpha King with a packless Omega who sleeps in stables and eats scraps. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, Vera said gently. She paired you with a king because you proved your worth the moment you gave everything for his son. Someone brave enough to fight impossible odds. Someone selfless enough to die for a stranger's child. Someone strong enough to unlock a gift that's been lost for over 3 centuries. Before Sirin could respond, there was a sound from the corner of the room. A small sound, a whimper. Sirin's healer sense flared automatically. Child, scared, not hurt, just frightened and trying to be quiet. It's okay, sweetheart, Vera called softly. She's awake. You can come say hello. A tiny figure emerged from behind an ornate screen. A little boy, maybe 2 years old with pale blonde hair that caught the firelight and eyes the color of sapphires. He was wearing soft blue pajamas and clutching a stuffed wolf to his chest. His face was tear-stained, his eyes red from crying. Prince Riven, in his human form. The boy stared at Sirin for a long moment, his lower lip trembling. Then he dropped the stuffed wolf and ran across the room, scrambling onto the bed with surprising agility for someone so small. Snow Lady, he sobbed, throwing his small arms around Sirin's neck. You wake up. I wait, and you wake up. Sirin froze, completely unsure what to do. She'd never been around children, never had anyone hug her like she mattered, like they'd been desperately waiting for her to come back. Hey, she said awkwardly, patting his back with one hand. Hey, it's okay. I'm okay. Bad men hurt me, Riven said, his words muffled against her shoulder. His vocabulary was limited, each sentence only 3 or 4 words, but the meaning was clear. You saved me. You so brave. Don't leave. Please don't leave. Something in Sirin's chest cracked. This little boy, this prince, who could have anyone in the world to care for him, was clinging to her like she was his lifeline. I'm not going anywhere, she heard herself say. I promise. Riven pulled back just enough to look at her face. His eyes were so earnest, so full of hope and fear and desperate trust. Promise you stay. I promise. The boy beamed and settled into her arms like he belonged there, his head tucked under her chin. Within seconds, his breathing had evened out. He'd fallen asleep, apparently content now that she was awake. He hasn't slept more than an hour at a time since we brought you in, Vera said quietly. He insists on staying in this room. Refuses to leave your side for more than a few minutes before he starts crying. His Majesty had that cot brought in so Riven could sleep close to you. Sirin looked at the small bed against the wall, clearly sized for a toddler, with rumpled blankets and more stuffed animals. He's been holding your hand every night, Vera continued, talking to you, telling you about his day, about his toys, about his father, as if his words could pull you back. I don't understand why, Sirin whispered. I'm just someone who happened to be in the right place. You're the person who saved him when no one else could. You're the person who gave everything to protect him. Children understand love in its purest form. And that's what you showed him, pure love, asking nothing in return. The door opened. Sirin tensed automatically, old instincts, screaming at her to be on guard around strangers. But the man who entered made her go still for an entirely different reason. He was massive, 6.5 feet of solid muscle with shoulders broad enough to block out the doorway. His hair was platinum blonde, almost white in the afternoon sunlight, and his eyes were the same brilliant sapphire as Riven's. His face was all hard angles and sharp edges, handsome in a brutal way, with scars across his jaw and cheekbone that spoke of violence survived. He wore dark pants and a simple white shirt, but he moved with the absolute confidence of someone who'd never had to prove his power. This was an alpha, not just any alpha, the king. And every instinct Sirin had developed over 7 years of surviving told her he was the most dangerous thing in the room. Kale Stormcrest stopped just inside the door, his eyes fixed on Seren with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she didn't. She'd learned early that showing weakness to predators was a bad idea. "You're awake," he said. His voice was deep, rough, the kind of voice that probably made people scramble to obey when he gave orders. "So I've been told," Seren replied. Her voice only shook a little. Kale's gaze dropped to Riven asleep in her arms, then back to her face. Something shifted in his expression, softened just slightly. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for saving my son, for giving everything to protect him." "I didn't really think about it," Seren admitted. "I just couldn't walk away." Most people would have. Most people do walk away when getting involved means risking their own life. Kale moved closer, each step deliberate and controlled. He stopped at the edge of the bed, close enough that Seren could smell him. Cedar and rain, and something else, something wild and electric that made her skin prickle. "The cub," Kale continued, "the white wolf you saved is my son, Prince Riven Stormcrest, my only child, the heir to my throne. You didn't just save a random pup. You saved my everything." The weight of that statement settled over Seren like a heavy blanket. The heir to the throne. She'd saved the future king. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I know. That's what makes it extraordinary. You saw a child in danger and you didn't hesitate. You didn't calculate the politics or the rewards. You just gave everything to protect him." Quayle paused, his jaw working like he was trying to decide how to say something difficult. "There's something else you need to know," he finally said. "When I found you, when I saw you lying in the snow dying, I felt the bond, the mate bond. You're my true mate, Seren." The words hung in the air between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. "That's not possible," Seren said, her voice cracking. "This doesn't make sense. 7 years I slept in stables and ate scraps. I own nothing. How can someone like me stand beside a king as an equal?" "The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes," Kale said, his voice firm but gentle. "You proved your worth the moment you gave everything for my son. Someone who can teach my son what real courage looks like. Someone who understands sacrifice. Someone who unlocked a gift that's been extinct for over 3 centuries." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her free hand, the one not supporting Riven's sleeping weight. His hand was huge, calloused, warm. The moment their skin touched, Seren felt it. A jolt of electricity that ran from her hands straight to her heart. The bond clicking into place, recognizing itself. "I'm not asking you to accept it right away," Kale continued. "I know this is overwhelming. You've been through hell. You almost died. And now you're waking up in a palace being told you're mated to a king. That's a lot to process." "That's an understatement," Seren muttered. The corner of Kyle's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "But I want you to know that you're safe here. You have a place here for as long as you want it. And my son," he looked down at Riven, his expression softening completely. "My son has clearly decided you're his person. So you're not getting rid of us easily." Over the next 2 weeks, Seren discovered what it meant to live in a palace. She had her own suite of rooms, bathroom with a marble tub big enough to swim in, a closet full of clothes in her size, soft fabrics, and rich colors. 3 meals a day brought on silver trays, more food than she could eat. Healers who checked on her daily, tracking her recovery with meticulous care. It was overwhelming, wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. But the most overwhelming thing was Riven. The little prince had apparently decided that Seren belonged to him. He followed her everywhere, his small hand clutching hers, chattering in his limited vocabulary about everything and nothing. He showed her his toys, his favorite spots in the palace, the gardens where flowers bloomed despite the late autumn chill. "This my room," he announced one afternoon, dragging her into a nursery decorated in blues and silvers. "You see my wolves?" He had at least 30 stuffed wolves in every size and color. He made Seren sit on the floor while he introduced each one by name. "This Luna, this Storm, this Brave, this Scared, but he getting braver." "That's a lot of wolves," Seren said, trying not to smile. "I like wolves," Riven said seriously. "I am Wolf. You save Wolf, so you my favorite." And just like that, Seren's heart cracked a little wider. Kale was different, more careful. He didn't push, didn't demand. He was just there, present but not overwhelming. He joined them for meals, sometimes sitting at the head of the table while Riven chattered at both of them. He walked with them in the gardens, keeping a respectful distance, but always within sight. He taught Riven his letters in the evenings, patient and gentle, in a way that seemed at odds with his brutal appearance. Seren watched him with Riven and saw a man who loved his son with a fierceness that bordered on desperation. A man who'd probably torn the world apart looking for his boy when the rogues took him. He hasn't been the same since Liana died, Vera told Seren one day. They were in the healing wing where Seren had started helping with minor cases. Her Lifeweaver gift was still unpredictable, still learning its own limits, but she could sense injuries with perfect accuracy. Riven's mother, she died in childbirth 2 years ago. Kale blamed himself, became harder, colder, focused everything on protecting Riven to the point where the boy was suffocating under it. What changed? Seren asked. You did. When Riven was taken when Kale thought he'd lost his son, I think it broke something in him. And then you saved Riven, gave everything to protect him. Kale saw what real love looks like. Selfless, unflinching, and he's been trying to figure out how to be that for his son ever since. That night, Seren couldn't sleep. She wandered the palace halls, marveling at the tapestries and paintings, the wealth on display in every corner. She ended up in the library, a massive room filled floor to ceiling with books. Can't sleep, Seren spun around. Kale stood in the doorway wearing sleep pants and nothing else. His chest was a roadmap of scars, old wounds healed, but never forgotten. He looked tired, vulnerable in a way he never did during the day. Too many thoughts, Seren admitted. Want to share them? She should say no, should maintain distance. But something about the late hour, the quiet library, the way he was looking at her like she mattered, made her honest. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. I don't know how to be someone's mate. I don't know how to live in a palace. I don't know how to be around people who don't see me as cursed or broken or wrong. For 7 years, I've been nobody. And now you're telling me I'm supposed to be a queen. I don't know how to be that person. Kale crossed the room slowly, stopped a few feet away, close enough to talk quietly but far enough to give her space. You want to know what I see when I look at you, he asked. Seren nodded, not trusting her voice. I see someone who walked into certain death to save a stranger's child. Someone who fought 3 rogues and won, despite being outmatched and overpowered. Someone who unlocked ancient magic through pure force of will and sacrifice. Someone who makes my son laugh for the first time since his mother died. Someone who's teaching me what it means to be brave. He took one step closer, then another, until he was right in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're not nobody, Seren. You're remarkable. You're everything I didn't know I needed. And if you give me a chance, I'll spend every day proving that to you. Seren's breath caught. The mate bond thrummed between them, warm and insistent, pulling her toward him. What if I'm not what you need, she whispered. What if the moon goddess made a mistake? She didn't. Kale's hand came up, cupping her cheek with surprising gentleness for someone so large. You're exactly what I need, what Riven needs. Someone who understands that real strength isn't about power. It's about choosing to protect others even when it costs you everything. Seren leaned into his touch without meaning to. His hand was warm, his skin rough with calluses, and something about it felt like coming home. I'm scared, she admitted. I know. So am I. Kale's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. But we can be scared together. We can figure this out together. You're mine, Seren, and I'm yours. That's what the bond means. Partnership. Equals. I've never been anyone's equal, Seren said, her voice barely a whisper. You are now. And then Kale leaned down and kissed her. Soft. Gentle. Nothing like she'd expected from a man who looked like he could break her in half without trying. The mate bond exploded between them, golden and warm, and right in a way that made Seren's eyes sting with tears. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Seren found herself smiling. So, she said, trying to lighten the moment, does this mean I have to learn how to be a queen now? Kale laughed. Actually laughed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. We'll take it one day at a time, starting with teaching you that you don't have to ask permission to eat food from the kitchens. I'm working on that, Seren protested. You asked a servant if it was okay to have breakfast yesterday. Because I wasn't sure if Kyle kissed her again, effectively ending the argument. But their peace was short-lived, because in the shadows of the palace someone was watching. Someone who didn't want a packless Omega to become queen. Someone who had plans of their own. And those plans had already been set in motion. The note arrived 3 days after Seren's first kiss with Kyle. She found it slipped under her door at dawn when she woke from another nightmare about the rogues. The paper was expensive, cream-colored, with a texture that spoke of wealth. The handwriting was elegant, flowing script that looked like calligraphy. The ghost girl doesn't belong in a palace. Leave before you join the last queen in the cold ground. This is your only warning. Seren's hands shook as she read it. Then read it again. The threat was clear, simple. Someone wanted her gone, and they were willing to kill her to make it happen. Just like they'd killed Queen Liana. The thought hit her like ice water. The last queen. That's what the note said. Join the last queen, not join the dead or meet your end. Specific phrasing. Intentional. Seren's Lifeweaver sense had been growing stronger over the past 2 weeks. She could feel life energy in everything now. The trees in the garden, the servants walking past her door, the small mouse living in the walls. And she'd started to sense something else. Darkness, wrongness, like spots of decay in otherwise healthy tissue. She'd felt it twice. Once when a visiting duchess had shaken her hand at dinner. Once when she'd walked past the royal archives and caught a whiff of something that made her gift recoil in instinctive horror. Seren dressed quickly, tucking the note into her pocket. She needed to talk to Kyle, show him the threat. Let him increase security or investigate, or whatever Alpha Kings did when someone threatened their mates. But when she opened her door, Riven was standing in the hallway, already dressed in tiny formal clothes, his hair carefully combed. "Snow Lady," he chirped, grabbing her hand. "Come big breakfast today, lots of people. Da says I gotta be good." "Sweetheart, I need to talk to your father about something important." "He at breakfast," Riven insisted, tugging her toward the dining hall. "He say come now, he want you there." Seren let herself be pulled along, still clutching the note in her pocket. She could show KL at breakfast. It would be fine. The formal dining hall was full. At least 30 people sat at the long table, all dressed in expensive clothes, all watching. As Seren entered with ribbon attached to her hand, she recognized a few faces. The Beta Garrick, a solid man with kind eyes who helped Kale run the kingdom. Several council members, visiting alphas from neighboring territories. And at the far end of the table in the seat of honor to Kael's left sat Duchess Ravenna Blackthorn. She was beautiful. That was Serene's first thought. Ravenna looked about 45 with elegant features and dark hair shot through with silver. She wore a burgundy dress that probably cost more than Seren had earned in her entire life, and diamonds glittered at her throat. Her smile was warm as she looked at Seren, her eyes crinkled with apparent friendliness. But Seren's Lifeweaver sense screamed. The darkness she'd felt before the wrongness was radiating from Ravenna like heat from a forge. It felt like death, like something fundamentally corrupt wearing a beautiful mask. "Ah, there she is," Kael said, standing as Seren approached. His eyes were warm when they met hers, and he pulled out the chair to his right. "Seren, please sit. Everyone, this is Seren Whitlock, my mate, and the future Luna of the Northern Territories." Polite applause rippled around the table. Seren sat feeling horribly out of place in her simple dress among all this finery. Riven climbed into the chair next to her, already reaching for the pastries. "It's wonderful to finally meet you properly," Ravenna said, leaning forward with that warm smile. "We saw each other briefly last week, but we weren't introduced. I'm Duchess Ravenna Blackthorn. I've been Kael's advisor for 20 years. I helped raise him after his parents died." "It's nice to meet you," Seren said automatically, even as her gift continued to scream warnings. "You must tell me your story," Ravenna continued. "How a Packless Omega came to save our dear prince and capture the king's heart. It's quite romantic." There was nothing overtly hostile in the words, nothing Seren could point to as offensive, but something about the way Ravenna said Packless Omega made it sound like an insult wrapped in silk. "I was in the right place at the right time," Seren said quietly. "How modest." Ravenna's smile never wavered. "Though I must say it's unusual for someone so young and inexperienced to take on the role of Luna. The position requires such breeding, such understanding of court politics and noble responsibilities." "Seren will learn," Kale said, his voice harder than before. "Just as I learned when I became king at 23. Of course," Ravenna waved a hand dismissively. "I meant no offense. I'm sure she'll do her best." The breakfast continued in that vein, Ravenna making polite comments that somehow felt like attacks. Other nobles watching Seren with barely concealed curiosity or disdain. Riven, bless him, stayed close to her side, occasionally patting her hand as if sensing her discomfort. When the meal finally ended, Seren stood to leave. Ravenna appeared at her elbow with surprising speed. "My dear, might I have a word, woman to woman?" The Duchess's smile was conspiratorial. "There are things about the palace you should know, things that will help you adjust." Every instinct told Seren to refuse, but Kael was already being pulled into conversation by the visiting alphas, and Garrick had scooped up Riven to take him to his morning lessons. Refusing would seem rude, suspicious. "Of course," Seren heard herself say. Ravenna led her to a small sitting room off the main hall. It was decorated in deep greens and golds, with a tea service already laid out on a low table. "Please sit," Ravenna said, pouring tea into delicate porcelain cups. "I thought we could chat, get to know each other. After all, we'll be working closely together." Seren sat on the edge of a velvet chair watching as Ravenna added honey and cream to both cups. The Duchess's movements were practiced, elegant, perfect. "You look pale, dear," Ravenna said, handing Seren a cup. "Are you feeling well?" "I'm fine," Seren said, not drinking. Her Lifeweaver sense was still screaming. Something was wrong. Something about this room, this situation, this woman. "You should drink," Ravenna encouraged. "It's a special blend. Very soothing. I had it made just for you." "Just for you." Seren looked down at the tea. It smelled fine. Looked fine. But when she focused her gift on it, really focused, she could sense something. A wrongness. A chemical signature that didn't belong. Poison. Not much. Not enough to kill, but enough to make someone very sick. Enough to weaken them over time. "Actually," Seren said carefully, setting the cup down untouched. "I'm not thirsty. Thank you, though." Something flickered in Ravenna's eyes, too fast to identify. But when she smiled again, it was colder. "Pity. I went to such trouble." The Duchess took a sip from her own cup, watching Seren over the rim. "Tell me, how did you really end up in that forest? It's quite a coincidence, don't you think? A packless healer just happening to be in the exact spot where the prince was taken." "I was traveling," Seren said, "looking for the next town. I heard him crying." "Hmm. And the rogues, you killed 3 of them yourself. A small Omega with no combat training. I had my father's knife." "How convenient." Ravenna set down her cup. The pretense of friendliness was gone now, stripped away to reveal something calculating beneath. "You know what I think? Think you're either incredibly lucky or incredibly clever. And I haven't survived 73 years by believing in luck." 73. But Ravenna looked 45 at most. Seren's gift focused, automatically sensing the Duchess's life force, and what she found made her blood run cold. Ravenna's energy was wrong, twisted. Instead of the normal flow of vitality, there were spots of darkness, areas where life had been stolen, taken from somewhere else, and grafted on like a bad transplant. The signature was familiar, horribly familiar. Dark Life Weaver. "You're like me," Seren whispered. "You have the gift." Ravenna's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Very good. I wondered if you'd sense it. Yes, I'm a Life Weaver, have been for 50 years, though I use the gift somewhat differently than you do, I suspect." She stood, moving to the window with predatory grace. "I drain life instead of giving it, take vitality from others to extend my own existence. It's quite useful. I've been 45 for 30 years now." "That's forbidden," Seren said, standing as well. "The gift is meant to heal, not survive, not thrive." Ravenna turned and her eyes had gone cold and hard. "You're young, naive. You think saving one child makes you a hero. You don't understand power yet, but you will." She stepped closer, and Seren could feel the dark energy radiating from her like corruption. "I killed Liana, you know," Ravenna said conversationally. "Fed her poison for 6 months. Small doses designed to mimic natural complications of pregnancy and childbirth. No one suspected. Why would they? I was her trusted advisor, her friend." Seren's heart was pounding. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're going to die in 3 days, Ghost Girl. That tea you didn't drink? It was meant to start the process. Make you weak. Make you sick. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it would be too late." Ravenna's smile was vicious. "But since you declined, I'll have to be more direct. Kale will, Kale will mourn you, just like he mourned Liana, and then he'll die in a convenient accident. And little Ribbon will meet an unfortunate end, and my grandson Eric, sweet Eric, who's been waiting so patiently, will inherit the throne. And I'll rule through him for the next 100 years." Ravenna moved faster than any human should be able to. Her hand shot out, dark energy crackling around her fingers, reaching for Seren's throat. Seren dove sideways, her Lifeweaver gift flaring in self-defense. She rolled behind the couch, her mind racing. She was outmatched. Ravenna had decades of experience with the dark version of their shared gift. Seren barely knew how to use hers, but she had one advantage. Ravenna wanted to kill her quietly. No witnesses, no evidence. That meant Seren just had to survive long enough to get help. She ran for the door. Ravenna's laughter followed her. "Run if you like. The palace is mine. You have nowhere to go." Seren burst into the hallway, nearly colliding with a servant. "Get the king," she gasped. Now, tell him it's Ravenna. Tell him she killed the queen. The servant's eyes went wide, but she nodded and ran. Seren didn't wait to see if help would come. She ran toward the royal archives, the place where she'd felt that wrongness before. If Ravenna had been killing for decades, there would be evidence, records, something. The archives were in the oldest part of the palace, down the stone stairs that descended into cool darkness. Seren grabbed a lamp from the wall and kept going, her breath echoing in the confined space. The archive room was massive, filled with shelf after shelf of books and documents. Seren's gift guided her, sensing the same dark signature she'd felt from Ravenna. There, a section in the back warded with magic that made her skin crawl. She broke the ward with a pulse of life-weaver energy, watched it shatter like glass. Inside were journals, dozens of them, all in Ravenna's elegant handwriting. Seren grabbed the most recent one and read by lamplight. Year 47 of my second life. The king's maid is pregnant. This complicates things, but not insurmountably. I've already begun adding widow's root to her morning tea. Undetectable, untraceable. She'll weaken slowly. The pregnancy will appear to turn difficult, and when she dies in childbirth, no one will question it. Year 48. Liana is dead. The king mourns. The child survived, unfortunately, but there are other ways. Patience. I have nothing but time. Year 49. The king has refused all attempts at finding a new mate. Good. That makes things simpler, but the child is protected too well. Too many guards, too much attention. I need an opportunity. Year 50. I've hired rogues to kill the brat during the spring hunt. They have silver arrows and instructions to make it look like a random attack. Once the heir is dead, I'll comfort the king, help him through his grief, and when he dies of heartbreak or accident, Eric will inherit. My grandson. My perfect, pliable grandson. Serene's hands were shaking. This was it. Proof, confession. Everything Kale would need to. I wondered if you'd find those. Serene spun. Ravenna stood in the doorway, backlit by torches from the hall. She dropped all pretense now. Her eyes were solid black, dark energy, crackling around her hands like lightning. You're clever, Ravenna said. I'll give you that, but cleverness won't save you. Nothing will save you. She raised her hand and darkness exploded towards Seren like a tidal wave. Seren's Lifeweaver gift reacted on pure instinct. Light burst from her hands, silver blue and pure, meeting Ravenna's attack head-on. The two energies collided in the center of the room with a sound like thunder. Impossible, Ravenna hissed. You've had the gift for weeks. I've had it for 50 years. You can't match me. But Seren wasn't trying to match her. She was trying to understand her. Her gift could sense life energy, could track it. And what she sensed in Ravenna was horrifying. Hundreds of lives, stolen over decades, drained and consumed to extend Ravenna's existence. Each one a dark spot in her energy signature. Each one a weight. I can feel them, Seren said. Everyone you killed, everyone you drained, they're still there, still part of you. They're fuel, Ravenna snarled. Nothing more. They're people. Seren pushed harder, her light growing brighter, and they want to be free. She didn't know if it would work, didn't know if her gift could do what she was attempting, but she reached out with her Lifeweaver sense and found all those stolen pieces of life energy, all those fragments of the people Ravenna had killed, and she called to them. Come back, she thought. Return to where you belong. Be free. The dark energy around Ravenna began to unravel. No, Ravenna screamed. No, what are you doing? Letting them go, Seren said. The stolen life force poured out of Ravenna like water from a broken dam. Not back to the people it had been taken from. They were long dead, but out into the world. Released, freed. And Ravenna aged. 45 to 50, 50 to 60, 60 to 70. Her skin wrinkled, her hair went white, her back bent. She screamed as decades caught up in seconds. 73, her true age. But the process didn't stop. Because Ravenna had been using dark magic for 50 years, and that kind of corruption had a price. 80, 90, 100. Please, Ravenna gasped, her voice now thin and cracked. Please stop. I'll leave. I'll go away. I'll never. You killed Liana, Seren said. You tried to kill Ribbon. You would have killed me and Kyle. You don't get mercy. 120. Ravenna's skin turned gray. Her bones became brittle. And slowly and possibly, she began to turn to stone. It started with her feet creeping up her legs like crystallization. She tried to move, but the stone was faster. Up her torso, her arms, her neck. The last thing to turn was her face, frozen in an expression of rage and terror. Then she was gone, a statue of an ancient woman already beginning to crumble. The statue that fell to dust. Saren collapsed to her knees, completely drained. Using that much power had taken everything she had. She could barely breathe, barely think. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Kale burst into the room, Garrick right behind him. Both of them shifted halfway to wolves ready for battle. Kale took in the scene. The pile of dust that had been Ravenna. The journals scattered on the floor. Saren kneeling in the center of it all, glowing with fading silver light. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. I felt it through the bond, he said, his voice rough. Terror. Pain. I thought I'd lost you. She killed Liana, Saren managed. Tried to kill Riven. The journals. It's all there. Garrick was already gathering them, his face grim as he read the first page. Your Majesty, he said quietly. We need to call the council. This is treason. Murder. Decades of it. Later, Kale said. He was holding Saren like she might disappear if he let go. Right now I'm making sure my mate is safe. He carried her out of the archives through the palace back to her rooms, set her on the bed and checked her over with hands that shook slightly. I'm okay, Saren said. Tired, but okay. You turned her to stone, Kale said. There was awe in his voice. You purified 50 years of dark magic in one burst. That should be impossible. I didn't know if it would work, Saren admitted. I just felt all those lives she'd taken, and I knew they deserved to be free. You're incredible, Kale said, cupping her face in his hands. You saved my son. You uncovered a traitor who'd been killing under my nose for decades. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Everything I need. He kissed her, and this time there was desperation in it. Relief. Fear transformed into fierce protectiveness. When they broke apart, Saren said, I have something to tell you. She pulled out the note from her pocket, showed him the threat. Kale's eyes went hard as he read it. She was warning you, trying to make you run before she killed you. He crumpled the paper in his fist. I should have protected you better. I should have. You couldn't have known, Saren said. She fooled everyone for decades. Not anymore, Kale's voice was steel. And she's gone. Dead. Turned to dust. You made sure of that. Over the next week, the truth came out. The council examined Ravenna's journals, horrified by the scope of her crimes. They found evidence of 16 murders over 50 years, all made to look like accidents or natural causes. They found the poison she'd used on Liana hidden in her private quarters. They found contracts with the rogue's payment for killing Riven. They questioned Eric Blackthorne, Ravenna's grandson, for 3 days. The young man broke down, horrified to learn what his grandmother had done. He'd known nothing of her crimes, had been kept ignorant and compliant. The council determined he was innocent, a pawn, not a player. They stripped him of his titles and lands, but allowed him to live. He chose exile to the far northern territories, wanting nothing to do with the throne that had cost so many lives. And through it all, Saren's reputation grew. The Packless Omega who'd saved the prince, who'd uncovered a conspiracy, who'd defeated a dark life weaver through pure force of will and righteousness. The wild white wolves began to appear at the palace borders. 30 of them watching from the trees. Garrick wanted to drive them off, but KL stopped him. Let them come, he said. On the night of the full moon, they emerged from the forest, and the eldest, a massive white wolf with silver eyes, shifted to human form. She was ancient, her hair white as snow, her face lined with age, but her eyes were clear and knowing. I am Silvermoon, she said, her voice carrying across the assembled wolves. Guardian of the old packs, speaker for the wild ones. She approached Saren, who stood beside KL in formal dress, about to undergo the mating ceremony that would make her officially Luna. We have waited, Silvermoon said, 324 years for this moment, for a life weaver to awaken, for the prophecy to begin. Prophecy, Saren asked. Silvermoon smiled. When silver blood awakens in winter's heart, the ghost queen shall bridge wild and throne. 2 heirs of moon shall end eternal night, and corruption's shadow turn to stone. A shiver ran down Saren's spine. Ravenna turned to stone. Yes, the corruption is cleansed, but the prophecy speaks of 2 heirs, you and another. Silvermoon looked at Riven, who stood holding Saren's hand, dressed in tiny formal clothes. The child carries dormant life weaver gift. When he cried for you, his tears glowed silver. The gift awakens in him too. Kale's hand tightened on Saren's. My son is a life weaver. Through her, Silvermoon confirmed. Her sacrifice awakened what was dormant. 2 life weavers, light against dark. The first in over 3 centuries. This is why the wild ones come. To witness, to protect, to serve the ghost queen. The 30 white wolves howled in unison, a sound that made the stars seem to shine brighter. "We offer our oath," Silvermoon said, "to guard the Life Weavers, to bridge wild and throne as the prophecy foretold." And one by one the white wolves bowed. The mating ceremony was unlike anything Saron had imagined. 500 wolves attended from every corner of the Northern Territories. The wild white wolves formed an honor guard, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. Kale stood before her in formal dress, his eyes locked on hers. "I claim Saren Whitlock as my mate," he said, his alpha voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "My Luna, my queen, my equal and my partner. From this day until my last breath." He bit down on her neck, marking her. The pain was sharp and bright, but when it faded, the mate bond settled into place perfectly. Complete. Unbreakable. Saran felt everything through it. Kale's love, his pride, his fierce protectiveness, his wonder at finding someone who complemented him so perfectly. "I accept," she said, her voice carrying. "I claim Kale Stormcrest as my mate, my king, my partner, from this day until my last breath." The bond flared golden, visible to everyone watching, and as it settled, something miraculous happened. The sky above the palace had been covered in dark clouds for 2 full years, ever since Lyanna died. A curse born from Ravenna's dark magic meant to hide her crimes and weaken the kingdom. But as Seren accepted the mate bond, as she became Luna Queen, the clouds began to part. Moonlight streamed through pure and silver, and where it touched the ground, wildflowers began to bloom. In winter, in snow, impossible flowers in impossible colors growing in defiance of season and sense. "The eternal night ends," Silvermoon said softly. "The Ghost Queen brings light." Riven cheered louder than anyone, then demanded to know if this meant Seren was officially his mama now. "Yes," Seren said, kneeling to hug him. "If you want me to be." "I want—" Riven threw his arms around her neck. "Best mama ever. Better than wildflowers." The celebration lasted until dawn, and when the sun rose for the first time in 2 years, without clouds to block it, the entire kingdom saw the miracle. Their Ghost Queen had brought the light back. Seren stood in the palace gardens watching Riven train with a wooden sword. He was 7 now, tall for his age, with his father's height and his mother's gentle nature. But when he focused on the injured bird in his hand, his eyes glowed silver. The bird's broken wing mended. Feathers regrew. It chirped and flew away, circling Riven's head in thanks. "You're getting better at that," Seren said. "Mama taught me," Riven said proudly. "You taught me healing is about love, not power." Serene's hand rested on her swollen belly, 6 months pregnant with a daughter who already showed signs of the Life Weaver gift. She could feel it, a bright spark of silver in her womb. Kale emerged from the palace, now wearing reading glasses that made him look distinguished rather than dangerous. He wrapped his arms around Seren from behind his hands, joining hers on their unborn daughter. "Council meeting ran long," he said. "They want your opinion on the new healing academy." "My opinion?" Seren still sometimes forgot she was queen, that her word carried weight. "You're the foremost expert on Life Weaver gift in the world," Kale reminded her. "Who better to design the curriculum?" The wild white wolves lounged in the gardens, fully integrated into palace life now. Silvermoon sat under a tree teaching young wolves the old stories. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but the alliance between wild and throne remained. Garrick approached across the garden, his hair now streaked with gray, but his stride still strong. "Your Majesty," he said with a slight bow, "the latest reports from the border. The alliance with the wild packs remains strong. No incidents in 6 months." "Thank you, Garrick," Seren said warmly. The beta had become one of her closest advisors, his steady presence a constant in the sometimes chaotic palace life. He smiled. "The kingdom prospers under your rule, my queen. Both of you." He nodded to Kale, then left them to their family time. "Mama," Riven said suddenly, "tell me again about the day you saved me." Seren knelt carefully, her pregnant belly making it awkward. "You were hurt and scared, and bad men wanted to hurt you more." "And you stopped them," Riven said. "I stopped them." "Why?" Riven asked. He asked this every time, always wanting to hear the answer. "Because you weren't a stranger, sweetheart. The moment I saw you, you became mine to protect. That's what family does. We protect each other." "And I saved you back," Riven said proudly, "with my tears, when you were sick. Yes, you saved me back. That's what love does. It makes us braver than we thought possible." Kale pulled them both into his arms, his family, his everything. "I love you," he said to Seren. "My Ghost Queen, my extraordinary mate." "I love you too," Seren replied. "My king, my home." She'd stopped running, stopped being nobody. She'd found a family, a purpose, a kingdom that needed her light. And every day she chose to stay, chose to love, chose to be brave. Because that was what real strength looked like. Not the power to take life, but the courage to give it freely. The ghost healer had become the ghost queen. And she would spend the rest of her life proving that love was the strongest magic of all.